It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, hockey fans? This is The Big Show, brought to you by The Hockey News. I'm Michael Traikos. With me today, we've got Devan Dubnyk and we've got Michael Augello. And yes, this is being recorded a day after the Carolina Hurricanes defeated the Vegas Golden Knights in 6 games to win the Stanley Cup. First Stanley Cup win by Carolina in 20 years. Their last one coming right after the lockout in 2006. And let's start just with some general overviews, guys. I thought it was an exciting Stanley Cup final. I know we kept talking about where does it rank. And, I think if it went game 7, we were probably talking about maybe an all-timer. But Devan, how would you rank this Stanley Cup final that went 6 games and just had a ton of drama, a ton of back and forth action?
Yeah, very, very high. I mean, the first 4 games were unbelievable. And game 5 and 6 were still good, but not quite the same level. I mean, the amount of goal scoring and lead changes and drama, overtime, like it was wild. And everybody was begging for that in games 5 and 6. And unfortunately for fans, unbiased fans watching, we kind of got that eventual overwhelming of Carolina. And I think it really kind of showed the most in game 6. Just to beat them in a 7-game series is so hard because they are just relentless in your face. And you could just see it wearing Vegas down last game. Even Jack Eichel in the 3rd period, some of the body language, he's on the wall and he's trying to make a play and he'd lose the puck and he'd almost quit. Like he was almost done. And that takes a lot for a player like that to show frustration in a close hockey game. So I think Carolina was just that good, but we got 4 absolutely incredible hockey games to start that series. And I think everybody wanted 7, just hoping for one more, some more crazy drama. But I think if that goes 7, it's definitely all time, but still a really, really, really good series.
Yeah. Well, what did you think, Mike? Because, on paper, when we were talking about going into the final, we thought, Vegas, Carolina, oh boy, this is going to be a defensive battle. Maybe not a lot of goals, not a lot of excitement, just 2 teams kind of clamping it down. As Devan just pointed out, we didn't get that. Maybe in the last game we saw, Carolina really kind of put it to Vegas in terms of not being able to score any goals against them. But how would you rate this Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, when we started this series, I was getting visions of 1995 New Jersey Devils suffocating defense, and it didn't end up that way, at least early in the series. They sort of played against type. But as Devan was saying, when you got to games 5 and 6, the clamps came on the Vegas Golden Knights, and Carolina suffocated them defensively, and especially in game 6. They got the lead, they extended the lead, and Vegas had a few really good opportunities, but that was about it. I mean, I think they went 19 minutes without a shot on goal. So, you have to give Carolina full credit for playing the way that they played. And I heard some criticism the day after. Well, they had an easy path. I mean, you can only play the teams that you come up against. They played Ottawa. They swept them. They played Philadelphia. They swept them. They were asleep for game 1 against Montreal and then swept the next 4. And it took them till game 4 in this series to really get a hold of things. But in the end, they did.
Yeah, to go 16-3 throughout the playoffs. And, like you mentioned, that they swept Ottawa, swept the Flyers, pretty much swept Montreal after that first game kind of hiccup after being off for basically 2 weeks. A real juggernaut. And Devan, let's talk about the goaltending, because for the first 3 rounds, the story was Freddie Andersen and the job he was doing in net. And albeit it was maybe on the surface an easy job with how much rubber he was facing, but Andersen in the final was not the same goalie. In Vegas, I don't know if they were getting to him or if that was just a really good team. But, kudos to Rod Brind'Amour for making a goalie change and bringing in Brandon Bussi, who hadn't played in quite a while. But as we saw in game 6 and in game 5 and really in game 4, the difference between these 2 teams was Vegas didn't make the goalie change that probably could have saved them, or, maybe just give credit to what Carolina was willing to do and rolling the dice with Brandon Bussi. How did you see it unfold?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, Freddie was really, really good in the first round. I think he doesn't get enough credit for how well he played against Ottawa, just because it was a sweep. And then it kind of got progressively easier. Like, I think, those Montreal games, they're not easy mentally because they're low shot, but for the first few, other than the last couple, they're overtime games. And yeah, Carolina was dominating and out shooting them 5-1. But they were tie games and they were overtime games. So mentally, those games were difficult, but physically, he's only getting 12 to 15 shots. And then, I don't think it's not like he went in against Vegas and he like wasn't good enough to perform that way. I just think you look at both sides, right? You got Carter Hart was the best goalie in the playoffs until that series started, and Freddie Andersen was one of the best goalies in the playoffs until that series started. So it might have been a little bit more of the way the series was going, both sides, and the way those games were playing. But when that change made, it's interesting to think about because it was an obvious time to take Freddie out. He'd played all the games and he's older and you want to keep him healthy and all this stuff. And they take him out at 4-0. You never expect that that's going to mean anything. And so if that game if they don't have the almost most epic comeback of all time and Bussi plays like he did in that game, does he start the next game? We don't know. So it's interesting because, that's fate. And that's how these stories are written. And that's how Brendan Bussi gets this opportunity to have this story written, because he goes in there and he plays extremely well and gets him to double overtime in this crazy game, even though they lost, kind of earned himself that next start. You don't know if it was kind of a nothing thing, then they might have gone back to Freddie in game 5 or was that game 5? I think would be game 5.
The games are blurring right now.
Bussi comes in and listen, this is a guy who at the start of playoffs, we were talking about who was going to start for Carolina. So It's not a situation where you've got just kind of a random backup on the bench. You got a guy on the bench who was 26-6 or something like that, whatever he was during the regular season, who arguably could have started game 1 of playoffs. So that's a weapon that's there, and good on Rod Brindamore to understand that and see the kind of energy that he brought into the group. And it certainly worked out throughout that. Now, when it comes to Vegas, I don't know. I don't think there necessarily should have been a change, because you don't have that same thing. You've got Adin Hill on the bench who won you a Stanley Cup, who's a capable goaltender, but he didn't play good hockey this year, and he didn't play good hockey all year, and he hadn't played for a long time. And again, it's kind of the same scenario. Carter Hart's stats weren't good, goals against wasn't good, all that stuff. But if you feel like he's still your best chance to win and you're watching him, I don't think he looks shaky. I think some goals were going in that weren't before, but we're not talking about terrible goals. This is the way the series was going. I still thought he looked sharp in his skating. He was, everything looked fine other than the end product. And if you decide that that's your best option, then you're going to continue playing him. And Vegas didn't have that option for now. Like, Adin Hill's a capable goaltender, but this year hasn't been, and he hasn't played for a very long time. So I think I wasn't surprised to see Hart stuck in there.
Oh, it was a cool, shades of, like you just mentioned, Devan, like shades of 2006, where Martin Gerber hands over the reins of net to Cam Ward. I thought it was a really cool thing that Jordan Staal, the first guy he gives the cup to, was Freddie Andersen, despite the fact that Freddie wasn't even the backup for the last couple games. Essentially, he was your third stringer because of, I think it was a knee injury. It was reported afterwards. But a nice moment there, giving the cup to Andersen, who was the second oldest guy on the team. Obviously, he's gone a long career waiting for this moment. Also, a nice touch was when Freddie Andersen tried to give the cup to Sebastian Aho, he actually refused it and said, no, it's going to Taylor Hall next. And Mike, what does this mean for Taylor Hall? Like, obviously we were joking. He's played for a lot of teams, and Buffalo Sabres being one of them. There's been a knock against Taylor Hall, obviously a number 1 overall pick, a Hart Trophy winner, and yet his career felt like there was just a big hole in it, probably because he hadn't won a championship, but, maybe never realized the kind of player that he had the potential to be. Does this put that to rest? And I think, do we consider Taylor Hall now in the conversation for future Hall of Famer?
I'm not sure about the Hall of Famer, but he has been a great reclamation project, and from a guy who was being benched in Chicago before he was traded to Carolina, and that was sort of the oh by the way trade when they got him. I mean, he's been a different player, and he's been physical. He's been fast. That line with him and Stankoven and Blake was one of the main reasons that Carolina won the Stanley Cup. So, yeah, I mean, he's really turned his career around, got a long-term contract in Carolina. He's happy there. I saw him play in Buffalo a few years back. He was sort of uninspired. It wasn't a good fit. He's playing the way he played back in Edmonton early in his career, and the year that he won the Hart with the Devils. So, I mean, he finished second in Conn Smythe voting behind Jordan Staal. So that's a testament to how well he played. But I have to say, just going in on the goaltending thing for a second, the key to the series, I mean, you'd be stupid not to play Freddie Andersen after going 12-1 in the first 3 rounds. You'd have to. And Devan would know better than I because he played in the league and I didn't. But sometimes it's tougher on a goaltender when he's facing 12 or 13 shots a night rather than 30 because you have to basically stay aware of what's going on. And he did that effectively. But in this series, I thought he started to seem a little bit overwhelmed. And I have the feeling that Mitch Marner, knowing him so well after playing against him in practice for 5 years, was part of the reason why he scored a hat trick in game 3. And the switch to Bussi, to my mind, is one of the 2 or 3 reasons why Carolina ended up winning a Stanley Cup. Vegas could not really solve him, where I think they may have solved Freddie at that point.
You mentioned Taylor Hall finished second in Conn Smythe voting. Obviously, Jordan Staal, the captain of the Carolina Hurricanes, was named the Conn Smythe winner. He was tied, I think, for 22nd overall in playoff points, but that goes out the window once the Stanley Cup final begins. And I think voters weighted the final and what Jordan Staal was able to do. I think he had goals in the first 4 or 5 games of the final, probably first 4. He was a horse, Devan. And do you agree with the choice to make him MVP, or do you see a case that maybe it should have been Hall or it should have been Logan Stankoven? Both guys playing on that third line were fantastic, but how did you view it?
I don't usually like them overweighing the Cup final too much. I think it's got it, but in this scenario, I absolutely agree with it because it was 6 goals in the first 5 games, tied a record that's been around for a long time. And it kind of gave them, like, his performance in the final was so good that you can weigh that heavily, but it also kind of gave them an opportunity. He's the heartbeat of that team. He's a captain. He's a leader. And it gave them an opportunity to give it to a guy who contributes so much to that group and is the MVP for other reasons other than the 6 goals right from the first puck drop fighting Brady Tkachuk. Like, he's the heartbeat and the heart and soul of that team. So you're able to give him this award for all of these things that he did throughout the playoffs that maybe don't just show up on the score sheet because he showed up on the score sheet so historically in the final. So I thought it was a great pick. I was happy to see him, and it's one of those things that everybody likes Jordan so much and his teammates and the way he works and the way he plays that we'll have a quick conversation about this, whether the final was overweighed. No one's upset that Jordan Staal won the Conn Smythe Trophy. No. Everybody's so happy for him and well deserved. And I mean, he was the guy. He was the guy at 37 years old in the Stanley Cup final, I believe tying or breaking a record for 6 goals in the first 5 games. So it was awesome to see him up there.
Yeah, I think when you've got a coach like Rod Brindamore and you've got a captain like Jordan Staal, it's like those 2 guys are like interchangeable. And just a side note, man, and that dressing room video of Rod the Bod having his shirt ripped off and hoisting the cup, like, puts all the coaches in the NHL to shame, puts all the players maybe in the NHL to shame. Like, oh boy, this guy turns 56 in August. Like, give me a break, Rod. Save some for the rest of us. But Mike, what did you think of the Conn Smythe voting? And as Devan mentioned, like, should the final be weighted a little bit more just based on what Staal was able to do?
I think Rod needs to stop going to GNC for some supplements. But I mean, I think they got the voting right. Staal, I mean, not only did he score 6 goals in 5 games. And, Tortorella even admitted in post game, I think it was after game 5, that they didn't really have an answer for him. They couldn't clear him from in front of the net. But the burden on him was greater in the Stanley Cup final because Sebastian Aho really wasn't scoring. He not only had to be the matchup center against Eichel probably half the time, but he also had to score because Aho was not scoring. And he did that, and he scored big goals at big times. And, everybody going into the Stanley Cup final had one particular player pegged for the Conn Smythe, and we'll talk about that guy in a minute. But I think with Carolina winning, it had to go to either Hall or Staal, and I think they got the right one with Jordan Staal.
All right, well, let's talk about that other guy that was in the Conn Smythe consideration, Mitch Marner. And it pains me to say that Mitch Marner did not show up in Game 6 when it mattered the most, Devan. This was the knock against him in Toronto, and it felt like that narrative had been ushered to the side after, basically the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and then maybe Game 3 where Mitch was just fantastic, scoring the fastest hat trick in NHL Stanley Cup final history. But, not being able to get the job done. I know this is a team sport, and I know that he was missing his center and William Karlsson. And let's give credit to Carolina for being able to shut down all of the Vegas Golden Knights. But what did you make of Mitch Marner's final performance here? Do you think this is one where it's going to be kind of eating at him this summer?
Well, of course, it's going to eat at you when you don't win the Stanley Cup and you're that close. But the hockey world in Toronto is going to be eating this up and saying that he disappeared again. Listen, everybody on Vegas technically disappeared in Game 6. Nobody got on the score sheet. And I wouldn't call it a disappearance as much as Carolina with an almost perfect performance in 60 minutes of hockey. They were trying. They were trying more than the Montreal Canadiens, in my mind, were trying. Like, Vegas was attempting to move the puck through the neutral zone, and Carolina was just all over them. So, it was not for lack of effort. You can't take even 2 games 5 and 6, and say that Mitch Marner isn't a playoff performer. You can't go back to that narrative when you had the type of performance that he had. Now, if he was just okay throughout the playoffs and then had the last 2 games, if you want to go down that road, sure. But when you had as great of a playoff performance as he did, you don't get to pick 1 or 2 games that, again, were very well played by the Carolina Hurricanes and say that he's a no-show in playoffs.
No, 10 goals, 29 points. He had 7 more points than the next highest scorer in the playoffs. I'm with you, Devan. That being said, I'm sure Toronto fans are going to have a little fun with this one. Probably happy that the Stanley Cup's not coming back to Toronto and being paraded around with Mitch Marner. But Mike, William Karlsson, maybe we didn't make enough of a deal about how important he was to that line. And, it wasn't just Mitch. It was Brett Howden, who also had a fantastic series. But, Karlsson, was he the glue of, that Vegas top line?
Yeah, he was. And, him coming back early in the playoffs and giving them, remember, for most of the regular season, Marner was playing out of position, playing center for Vegas. So Karlsson coming back allowed Marner to move back to his natural position. Howden had I would have disputed if Vegas had won, Howden should have gotten Conn Smythe votes because I believe he led them in scoring with 14 goals throughout the playoffs. But I volunteer to go down that road, okay? 26 games in Toronto, games 5, 6, and 7. Mitch Marner, 1 goal, 10 assists, -8 in those games. Now, he did really well against Utah and Anaheim. Those are 2 inexperienced teams. In games 5 and 6, donut hole. 0 goals, 0 assists, -4. I'm not saying he didn't show up. He didn't produce. And a team that is top-heavy like Vegas, who depends on their top 6 to score, who didn't have the depth that Carolina had, line up 1 through 12 up front, they need their stars to score. And he didn't score. So I think the criticism of him, and you had a lot of media members and the blogosphere and everybody who were basically pounding on the fan base in Southern Ontario for running Mitch Marner out of town. Well, that fan base right now has got the last word.
All right. We'll give Devan the last word here. We talked about Rod Brindamore. I think early on in the playoffs, there was talk about if Carolina can't get over the hump, could he be gone as the head coach of the Hurricanes? He's in year 2 of 5, so it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Word is that he's probably one of the more underpaid coaches. But what do you think of John Tortorella, Devan? He was basically came in here as sort of the closer to try to get Vegas to, win a Stanley Cup, and he got them right up until, game 6. Would you keep him around? Do you think he's back in Vegas next season?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you make that, if they make that hire and they lose in the first round, then you can talk about it. But they made the hire and he got them 2 wins away against a really, really good Carolina team, and he had them playing very, very well. He had them, they looked like a completely different team than they did in the regular season. So you bring a coach in, he did everything that you'd ask of a coach coming in. He brought a team that was severely underperforming to performing maybe higher than expected and looking really good doing it. So yeah, they came up 2 games short, but what else are you looking for? And you're not, they did bring him in to compete for the Stanley Cup, but I don't think there's any way you bring a coach of John Tortorella's pedigree in just for one playoff run, unless it really didn't work out. But it quite obviously did. The players obviously responded to him. Again, Torts is getting rid of this this jerk not attitude, but persona. When it's just more and more players coming out, the players seem to respond to him. They enjoy him, and he gets what he wants out of the players while still being hard on them. So you have to imagine that there was some future tied into that hiring of John Tortorella. I'd be very, very surprised if he didn't stick around in Vegas.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Vegas is ruthless, man. It's like
they are ruthless. Now his leash might be short, but you got to think that they're not going to cut him off for coming up 2 wins short.
No, and it seemed like the players just loved them, especially Mitch Marner, Carter Hart. So yeah, we'll see. Let's move on. With the Cup final done, the NHL announced the 2025-26 All-Star teams, and the first team, probably no surprise, we have Connor McDavid at center, Nikita Kucherov and Jason Robertson on the wings, with Cale Makar, Zach Werenski on defense, and Andrei Vasilevsky in net. So obviously the Vezina winner in Vasilevsky, Norris Trophy winner in Werenski, and the Hart Trophy winner in Kucherov. Second team, just go quickly through it. You got Nate McKinnon, Cole Caulfield, David Pastrnak, Rasmus Dahlin, and Evan Bouchard with Logan Thompson in net. Mike, thoughts on this, on who was named? Do you think there was any snubs that should have been first or second team All-Stars?
I looked over the scoring during the regular season, and there were a couple players that were high up that didn't get on the first or second team. One being Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, I think that might have been a reflection of the fact that Winnipeg had an off year, but Martin Necas of Colorado was a big part of that Avalanche team. These are based on the regular season and not based on the playoffs. And Necas did not have a good playoffs, but he did do very well playing sort of a secondary role behind Nathan McKinnon in Colorado. So I think they missed a couple players, but I think in general they got it pretty close and pretty right.
Devan, no Colorado goalie in that list. No Quinn Hughes. But you got Evan Bouchard, who may surprise some fans who, it didn't feel like he was getting his accolades despite doing what he did offensively. Any snubs that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at the Colorado goalies as snubs. I mean, you've got 2 goalies on there. I definitely think that Quinn Hughes is a bit of a surprising one. It's hard because you start talking about guys left off. It's like, well, who do you take off? Because when you have 10 players and 2 goalies in the entire league, it's hard to say that anybody doesn't deserve to be on there. But Quinn Hughes, obviously, and maybe it's a little bit because of how great he was in playoffs, and that's fresh on my mind of what he looked like in playoffs. But he was incredible for the Wild this year. But yeah, I don't think that, and it's nice to see Evan Bouchard on there, because I think you're right. He deserved, he had a really good year. He's taken a lot of flack over the years in Edmonton, and he had a really, really good season. and a good time for it too after signing the big contract. So nice to see him on there.
Yeah, I got to think that if there was a third team, that Macklin Celebrini's probably named as the center. But again, to Devan's point, you're going to replace Connor McDavid or Nate McKinnon with Celebrini. This was a year where there was just so many great seasons. I'm counting here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players had 100 or more points, and 3 of them had 127 or more points. So it was a banner year. We'll see if this continues next season. I don't see how it doesn't. It's not a fun time, Devan, to be a goalie in the NHL right now with how many high-profile, high-scoring forwards there are. So speaking of goaltenders, though, Devan, Devils are gauging interest in Jacob Markstrom on the trade market. And, Markstrom now has spent last 2 seasons with New Jersey after being traded there from the Calgary Flames back in June 2024. He had a .307 goals against average, but a sub-900 save percentage in 44 games this year. What do you think? Is there still a strong market for Jacob Markstrom? Obviously, this is a guy that went to the Olympics with Sweden, so he's still one of the top goaltenders, I think, in the world. But where do you see him landing, and what kind of return do you think New Jersey could be asking for him?
Return wise, I don't think you're going to get a ton just because of his age and he's again older. The shorter contract's good, but it's just one of those things. You can get something, but it's not going to be anything crazy. I can think of this Canadian team. Can't really put a finger on it, who seems to always have goaltending issues, that could maybe use a guy like Jake, right? He'd maybe use a guy like that. Was the first thing that came into my head, and when that showed up, and kind of like a perfect scenario is it's a guy. He looked unbelievable at the Olympics too when the game against the U.S. Like, he has that in him. He has that ability if he can stay healthy. He's big and athletic. The options for Edmonton are just so limited on what they need and want compared to what is actually available and what they could actually do. I've mentioned before on obviously Philip Gustafson going down that road. That's going to cost you a whole lot more. This could be something that could fit into your salary cap. Now, where do you go with the Tristan Jarry thing? Do you have enough room to go Markstrom and Jarry? Maybe. I don't know. It's not that far-fetched. That puts them at 11 and a quarter, I think, salary cap-wise. Are you able to move Jarry and have Ingram as a guy, well-liked guy, definitely has earned a contract to be a full-time NHL guy. But that could be a short-term project that isn't going to kill you if it doesn't work out perfectly. And you're going to have to give something in return. You can always see if the Devils could hang on to a little salary, but that was the first thing in my head. I was like, wow, what a concept.
I think whenever we're talking goalies and who might be available, I think number one landing spot has to be Edmonton for everyone. Whether it's, Anthony Stolarz in Toronto, where could he land? Well, Edmonton. Vegas ever thinks about trading Adin Hill, I would think, all right, Edmonton's probably going to be the top of the list. What do you think, Mike? Markstrom makes $6 million a year. This will be the first of his 2 years coming up. So it kind of does align with the window that they have there with Connor McDavid. Is Edmonton looking like the natural fit?
They have to pray that Sonny Mehta is a big fan of Tristan Jarry, because I don't think they want to waste over $11 million on 2 goaltenders. I mean, I think Markstrom can still play. One viable option, and it depends on what's going to happen with the goalie who's carried them to 2 Stanley Cup victories, is in Florida, because if Sergei Bobrovsky hits UFA on July 1st, a cheaper option might be to trade for Markstrom if they don't want to pay Bobrovsky $8 or $9 million on a new deal. So, that's a possibility. But, the problem with this goaltending market, I think a guy like Stolarz is movable, even though he has 4 years on a contract, because his cap hit is $3.75 million. You've got teams out there like Buffalo, who's probably trading Devin Levi, who's on a under $1 million contract. Detroit trading Sebastian Cossa, who is I believe still on an entry-level deal. Teams are not going to be willing to trade for goalies who are making six and a quarter like Adin Hill or Markstrom unless the team that's trading them retains. And we know that like in the example of Aiden Hill, Vegas is not going to retain salary. So, they'll find a way to move him out somewhere. But there are teams out there. Utah needs a tandem goalie, maybe behind Vejmelka. So there are enough teams out there that I think, can accommodate some of these veteran goalies. But the teams that are trading them will have to retain salary.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of goalies kind of like on that reclamation project kind of category. Alexander Georgiev is another one that's trying to get a job back in the NHL. We'll see where he lands up, but I'm kind of with you. If you're going to bring Markstrom in, you're going to have to get New Jersey to swallow some of that cap space, because $6 million, unless you're going to take back a bad contract. But we'll see. Maybe there's a deal to be worked out with Darnell Nurse and multiple pieces. For over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. And with that, we go to the action of rapid fire. So here we go. Let's get this started. Devan, like or dislike, the Flyers are expected to sign goalie Dan Vladar to a 5 to 6 year contract extension, likely to land in the mid $5 million range.
I like it. I think that's, he earned it. He's a well-liked guy. I spoke to Rick Tocchet on NHL Network, and he loved his work ethic and his competitiveness and his leadership with that group. And if you can get a guy who what you're going to get in that 5 to mid 5 range for that amount of time, I think it's great, because at the end of the day, even if you get 2 or 3 years out of him, those last couple of years at 5, even if he slides into your 1B role and somebody else takes over like that, the way the cap's going up, that's going to be nothing. So I think he's definitely earned that. And when they're signing these deals, they're usually looking at why he had the year that he had, and is that sustainable? And I think with him, like the things I mentioned, his attitude, his work ethic, his leadership, all of those things is something that they really liked and want to keep for an extended time.
Yeah, breakout year for Vladar, and he turns 29 in August. And Devan, is that that 26 to 29? We tend to see a lot of goalies sort of kind of figure it out around the 26, 27 year mark. Do you think it was just a matter of right place, right time for him?
Yeah, well, I was 28, but it was close, right in that range. But yeah, some guys can figure it out early. It's just it's a unique position to get, truly playing games and playing enough games. And like you look at a guy like maybe Vejmelka, he's able to figure it out a little bit earlier, but that's because he was placed in a unique situation where they just played him and played him and played him and played him. So he got this like massive bulk of all this experience and game experience and ups and downs and all this stuff, because it was both Arizona and then Utah were in situations that they were just like, we're going to see what we got in this guy and let him run. Now that doesn't usually happen where you're just going to give it to a guy. So that age thing happens because it takes a while for goalies to play all of these games, go through all these ups and downs, figure out how to be consistent, game reads, like all of these things that you need thousands and thousands and thousands of reps. It takes a while to get those reps, and some guys can figure it out earlier, but for the most part, it takes a while for goalies to truly build that mental kind of toolbox of all these game reads and things that happen and all the kind of little tricks that you need, because you need to know what's going on in front of you before it happens, because the game's too fast. So I think that's just why you see it, guys figuring it out a little later.
All right. Mike, Philly's been a goalie graveyard for years. It seems like their best goalies end up having success when they leave Philadelphia. Is that a reason to like this potential deal for Vladar?
Well, he had a great year, no doubt. He's a good goaltender. He's paid his dues. He's been a backup in a number of places like Calgary and Boston. But, now he got an opportunity and he took advantage of it. The only problem I have with this deal is it's too long. I think if you're going to pay him 5 years at $5 million, that's $25 million. Why don't you pay him 6 over 4? Why don't you, with the cap going up as much as it's going up, I think you're better off on a shorter term deal and paying these players a little more, because the cap is at 104 this year. It's probably going to be up to 120 in a couple years. Pay the little extra, and they're not a team that's capped out. So that will be the way I would go. But I agree. He's a good goaltender. Lock him up and stabilize in net. And, wait, they have a couple of goaltending prospects that are coming, but they're probably 2 or 3 years away.
All right. Number 2 question. This is a fun one here. Michael Augello, if you could change anything with the NHL today, what would it be?
Well, short of replacing Gary Bettman with Bill Daly, it would be changing the conference, the playoff format to the 1-8 conference format. I think it's fairer. I think the divisional format is a joke because we get the same matchups over and over, which is boring. And I think it would be more entertaining, but they seem to focus on the first round being the best round. And honestly, I want the best teams to get to the Stanley Cup final. And I don't think that happens in a divisional playoff format with the 2 wild cards. I think it's better if it's a 1-8 format.
How about you, Devan?
Couldn't agree more with that one. That's the one I don't know if it's going to change, but it might, because everybody's, it's starting to ramp up. The talk's been there for a long time. So we'll see. I agree that needs to change. Something interesting that will never change is always the multi-point system, going to 3 for a regulation win and 2 for overtime and down the ladder. Never happened though, because that eliminates the parity and it separates teams, and that's the opposite of what the league wants, which is completely understandable. They want teams to feel like they're competitive toward the end, even kind of when they're not. They want everybody to feel like they're in a playoff race as long as they possibly can. I'll say I would like to get rid of the penalty on a goalie interference challenge. If you lose a goalie interference challenge, just lose your timeout and leave it alone. The offside makes sense. It's black and white. It either is or it isn't. But the goaltending interference it changes day to day. It changes who's looking at it. The league can tell you all day that they've got this, consistent system and how they look at it. Like, there's no way the call you get one day could be completely opposite the next day. And that's fine, because it's a judgmental call. So however you feel that day, however you're watching the game, we're people. That call is gonna change. So coaches should be able to make these calls and not risk losing a hockey game or changing the whole hockey game when it varies day to day. But you still lose your timeout if you lose it, and you lose the opportunity to challenge later in the game.
I like that one. I'm buddies with Kay Whitmore, so I always bug him about the goalie interference, and I'm like,
I love giving Kay a
find it for me, and he can never. We always go back and forth with this, but you're right. It very much is subjective. So, I like that one. Normally I would just say get the final, have it end earlier than we typically get, but we're on June 14th and it ended this year. I'm pretty happy that it didn't go into the 20s, guys, interfere with my cottage season here. Speaking of the summer, Devan, give us your top trade candidate for this summer.
Oh, well, we just talked about one with Jacob Markstrom, but I'm going to go easy here, because this is not really I'm in summer mode already, so I haven't given too much thought to this. But the obvious one is Darnell Nurse. They've put that one out there, so not really a hot take that he's a trade candidate, but definitely something that's going to be very interesting to watch, kind of how it plays out, because it's a very unique situation. They've come at him, he's agreed. Ball's kind of still in his court, but they've also told him it's not. Like, it's just going to be very interesting the way it pans out, because they've put him in this situation, but that's not an easy contract to move. So they've kind of, there's no choice now, but how they go about it will be interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking to see where he lands. How about you, Mike? Maybe is it Darnell Nurse, or is there someone else that you got your eye on for a trade candidate this summer?
Well, I'll stay away from the Larkin and the Nurse guy the situations, because they've requested trades, so that's sort of low hanging fruit. But I'll say Jake DeBrusk of the Vancouver Canucks. I wrote about this for Hockey News. He is under contract for 5 more years at $5.5 million, with the cap going up. That's very attractive. He has scored 20 or more goals 5 seasons in his career. Vancouver is going nowhere. They're rebuilding. They could probably get a first-round pick and prospects for a player who's under the age of 30. Now, he's got a no-move clause this year, but it goes to a 15-team no-trade next season. So he's in a similar position to Nurse, where he's got some control over where he's going to go, whereas next year they can trade him to half the league. So I think he's going to end up getting traded. He could be somebody that Buffalo looks at if it's a replacement for Alex Tuch, who I'm convinced is going elsewhere.
All right, real quick here, guys. BetMGM just released its odds for next season's Stanley Cup winner. Leading the charge is the Colorado Avalanche, followed by Carolina Hurricanes to repeat, then Vegas, followed by Edmonton, Florida, and Tampa Bay. Devan, who do you got winning next season?
I'm going to stick with the Vegas odds and say Colorado, and reason being, if you're picking someone now, when we did their postseason obituary there, they got the whole squad coming back, give or take a couple. So there's no reason now. Obviously, they got to find a way to get it done. But this is not a situation where they had this unbelievable season and they put all the chips in and they didn't win, and now the team's blown up. They got the whole group coming back, give or take a couple. And we know management there always does a great job of kind of finding these right pieces, these right fits to come in that fit well with the group. This was a little surprising end to the playoffs, the way it ended for them. But I still think that team is really incredible. And if you got to pick now, it's tough to look away from them.
How about you, Mike?
Like Lazarus rising from the grave, the Florida Panthers will come back. I mean, everybody's healthy. They've got a top 10 pick that they're going to probably end up trading for help right now. And I think, with the players that they have and with the players that were injured and out most of the year, if they find the goaltender, which I'm sure is number one on Bill Zito's wish list, they're going to be back. And they'll be a terror like they always have been.
All right. I could get on board with the Colorado versus Florida Panthers final, guys. Just saying. But listen, this was a great episode. This was a great Stanley Cup final and a nice kind of end to the season. For the Hockey News Big Show, I'm Michael Traikos. That's Devan Dubnyk, Michael Augello. We'll see you next time.